Okay, so the news that we just woke up to is absolutely insane. We have never seen anything like this in NFL contractual history. And obviously, we're going to be asking questions about how it applies to Brandon Aiyuk and the 49ers. Cowboys fans are going to be asking how it applies to their receiver, CeeDee Lamb, who's waiting for a new contract. Justin Jefferson has just signed the largest non quarterback deal of all time. And he didn't take aim at the high water mark at his own position at receiver. He took aim at the high water mark in all positions outside of quarterback. He took aim at Nick Bosa's contract. But anyway, it is a 4-year, $140 million extension for Justin Jefferson, which adds up to 35 million per year. But as you know, fully guaranteed money is what we should be looking at. And I did look at it. Adam Schefter reported it. 88.7 million in fully guaranteed money for Jefferson. That beats out Bosa's number of 88 million. If you want to compare it to other receivers, here's the top APY for wide receivers. 35 million for Jefferson, AJ Brown at 32 million, Amon-Ra St. Brown at 30, Tyreek Hill at 30, Jalen Waddle at 28.3. As I said, though, APY, I've been repeating this for weeks. APY is not where it's at. Fully guaranteed money is where it's at. And this right here is absolutely staggering. The most fully guaranteed money ever for wide receivers. You saw Jefferson barely beat out Bosa, right here. 88.7 million against Bosa's 88 million. It was clearly negotiated to surpass Bosa. Well, how about picking on guys from his own position group? Well, when Jefferson does that, you have a $36.2 million gap in between his 88.7 million and the previous high watermark, Tyreek Hill, 52.5 million. So all these receivers had been straining to get close to Tyreek Hill's number. We saw AJ Brown sign right before the draft at 51 million. Couldn't quite get to Tyreek's. Calvin Ridley's deal was surprisingly big at about 47 million, fully guaranteed. All of a sudden, Justin Jefferson came in and delivered an absolute outlier. We have never seen a contract jump like Justin Jefferson's today. There is now a $36.2 million gap in between number one and number two, Jefferson and Tyreek Hill. And I have to ask, does this pop the wide receiver bubble? The very first knee-jerk reaction is, oh my gosh, this is going to raise Brandon Aiyuk's price. This is going to raise CeeDee Lamb's price. This is going to raise Jamar Chase's price. But sometimes we deal with complete outliers. Of course, over the long run, this will raise receiver prices, but we're talking about the short run because Aiyuk wants a new deal now. CeeDee Lamb wants a new deal now. Jamar Chase wants a new deal now. Normally, these are incremental jumps that we see. This is anything but an incremental jump. So at some point, teams are going to say, wait, we can't pay this. Teams do have contractual leverage in this situation because Brandon Aiyuk is still under contract with the 49ers for $14.1 million this year. CeeDee Lamb is still under contract for his fifth-year option this year. Jamar Chase is still under contract with the Bengals for 2 more seasons. Year number 4, followed by his fifth-year option because he was also a first-round pick. At some point, this growing wide receiver bubble, and I mean, this is an exploding wide receiver bubble. At some point, it's going to pop, explosion, pop, same thing. And when that happens, teams are going to refuse to play this game of just upping the ante. The question is this Justin Jefferson deal a complete outlier that the 49ers and the Cowboys just ignore in terms of Aiyuk and CeeDee Lamb? And they say, no, we'll continue incrementally building right around that Tyreek Hill deal. The other twist here is that Tyreek Hill's agent can now be calling the Miami Dolphins and saying, hey, look at this Justin Jefferson money. I don't know which way this is going to go in the short run. I think the more likely direction is that the teams are going to try to put their foot down at least until there's some kind of bigger deadline pressure, and that would be training camp and the season. So, I mean, it's a more context here is that it's a 69% increase for Justin Jefferson from that 52.5 million to the 88.7 million in fully guaranteed money. That $36.2 million gap. I mean, when we look at the amount of fully guaranteed money that Amon-Ra St. Brown got, it was 34.2 million. Amon-Ra, people thought that deal was big. I was trying to say, wait, it's not that huge because the fully guaranteed money is only in the mid 30s. It was that amount of fully guaranteed money was smaller than the gap that Justin Jefferson has created between number one and number two, between his total and Tyreek Hill's total. Now, is Jefferson deserving of this? Well, yes. Field Vision, my buddy Scott runs this company. They do such a good job of quantifying the efficiency at each level of the field, and he's deserving of the number one deal. Now, everybody could sit back and debate amongst themselves if he's deserving of $88.7 million fully guaranteed. And that's obviously what teams are going to do in their own internal processes. If you want to see a comparison, this is Justin Jefferson first in total EPA. This was 2022 before he got hurt in 2023, but he led the league in volume. He led the league in efficiency. Yards per route run, he was 10th. So wasn't quite in that top five there, but the volume obviously in Minnesota's head won out when determining how to compensate Justin Jefferson. Brandon Aiyuk, on the other hand, this is his 2023 season, was not first in volume, was seventh in receiving yards because the 49ers have many more weapons, many more mouths to feed, but the total EPA outpaced the volume, which just showed how efficient he was. And he's also in the top 10 in yards per route run. You could see what parts of the field Brandon Aiyuk really excelled in. The intermediate middle or the deep middle was a big spot for Brandon Aiyuk, and the intermediate left was a huge spot for Brandon Aiyuk as well. The numbers indicate that Aiyuk, when you combine volume and efficiency, is not quite at Justin Jefferson's level. But I also would say that they do indicate that he's not 69% behind Justin Jefferson's level. I think the gap was a little bit closer, but that's where the money gap between Jefferson and somebody like Tyreek Hill is right now. So the way that the league responds to this is going to be fascinating. Because last year, for example, when Nick Bosa signed his contract at $88 million fully guaranteed, the previous high watermark was TJ Watt, and he was at $80 million fully guaranteed. So that was, it was a big deal. Bosa chattered all of the non-quarterback numbers for new deals, but it was only 10% more than TJ Watt's contract in terms of fully guaranteed money. So the fact that Justin Jefferson at his position has now surpassed Nick Bosa at 88.7 with $52.5 million being the mark that he broke, that's a 69% increase. I can't emphasize that enough. 69% against 10%. This is something that we really have never seen before. So the 49ers and Aiyuk impact, it's, maybe the 49ers are huddling up with the Cowboys and the Bengals right now because CeeDee Lamb and Jamar Chase are in similar boats. I am going to be waiting with bated breath to see exactly how this evolves the market, because I feel that the NFL throws us a curveball every few weeks. We get something new and exciting to track, something unprecedented to track. And that's exactly what's happened here with Justin Jefferson, who, again, has the volume, has the efficiency to be the top paid receiver in football. We expected Justin Jefferson to be the top paid receiver in football. We even heard that $35 million a year was a possibility, but we didn't know if it was going to be $35 million a year in real money or if there was going to be some funny money. At least on first sight, when we look at the Adam Schefter report, there doesn't appear to be a whole lot of funny money in this deal, because that's why I like to look at the fully guaranteed total, and the fact they released that right away They weren't trying to hide anything. They said $110 million in total guarantees and $88.7 million in full guarantees. The fact that that was released right away means that this is a player-friendly deal. And as you can see, the number of fully guaranteed money is correlated, even in ranking here, with the APY. We're measuring Justin Jefferson against Nick Bosa more than we're measuring him against other receivers. But we do have to measure him against other receivers for the purposes of what Brandon Aiyuk and CeeDee Lamb might do. So anytime that the market sees a complete shock that has a chance to be an outlier, it's anybody's guess how it's going to affect what comes next in the short term. Obviously, in the long term, if the NFL revenue keeps on growing, if salaries keep on growing the way that they have been growing, we would expect at some point, probably far into the future, Justin Jefferson's current deal to be eclipsed. But people care more about the short term than the long term now, with Brandon Aiyuk and CeeDee Lamb and Jamar Chase all wanting new contracts. See, this is exactly what I was talking about when we were seeing Nico Collins, Amon-Ra St. Brown, those receivers all signed their deals, right? I was saying, hey, wait for Justin Jefferson, wait for CeeDee Lamb, maybe wait for Jamar Chase as it relates to Brandon Aiyuk, because that was the minor leagues. Amon-Ra St. Brown at $34 million fully guaranteed. That was minor league stuff. I mean, I even put out the spreadsheet of some of this money. Let me find it really quickly. This is going to be on my Twitter. This was a few days ago. It just wasn't comparable. Nico Collins was in the mid-30s, fully guaranteed as well. Now you're dealing with $88.7 million fully guaranteed. So we're talking about all this chump change in the 30 millions, and now all of a sudden we're talking about something near 90 million. I mean, this is a nearly 3x increase over the money that we're talking about earlier. So if anything's going to pop the wide receiver bubble, it's going to be something like this, an unprecedented increase like this. All right, I've got it right now. I'm going to pop this open for you guys. This is just the graphic I made the other day, obviously before the Justin Jefferson edition. So you can put Justin Jefferson at the very top at 88.7 million right now, and you could shade it in gray. Anything shaded in gray has been signed this off season. So Jefferson high water mark. Now look down here. This was my main point the other day, is that all of these contracts, Jalen Waddle, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Nico Collins, all of which had been signed at some point since mid-April. So over the course of the last month and a half, all of those were in the mid-30s, low to mid-30s in terms of fully guaranteed money. Those were all going to be underneath what Brandon Aiyuk would ultimately command based on his resume. A lot of people were freaking out because of the APY, but it was about the fully guaranteed money. And the APY, some of these deals didn't match the fully guaranteed money. There was funny money involved, right? Especially with Amon-Ra St. Brown's. I think he's at 30 million APY, but the fully guaranteed money way short of somebody like Tyreek Hill, who's also at 30 million APY, but he's at 52.5 up here. And even Tyreek Hill has funny money. So the fact that you saw Justin Jefferson swoop in at 88.7 on this scale, so it's him and everybody else. I mean, again, the gap between Jefferson and Hill is as big as the fully guaranteed money total of some top 10 guys down here. The fact that that happened should completely obliterate any notion of what was expected, I think, for Justin Jefferson. And it's going to create a shockwave that will probably take at least a few hours for agents to wrap their heads around. And it might take the market a few weeks, few months, maybe even a few years to wrap its bearings around what just happened with this Justin Jefferson deal. Crazy, crazy stuff on this Monday morning. What a way to start our week, right? Let's open this up to 49ers Q&A. Ready for your questions as we wake up. Obviously, no breakfast for me yet. Woke up to this news, started getting some of this ready. What's the maximum I think the 49ers should pay Brandon Aiyuk? I always predicted something around that 50 million in fully guaranteed money. If I'm the 49ers, I look at this and I say, hey, we have ultimate leverage here because Ayuk is still under contract for this 2024 season at this $14 million rate. So that's going to anchor down any potential negotiations if you let it. This deal for Justin Jefferson will raise the franchise tag amount because the franchise tag is the average of the top 5 most valuable contracts at the position. So now all of a sudden you could toss in a Justin Jefferson deal and you could say, okay, whoa, that's gonna bump up the average a little bit. But that wouldn't come into play until the 2025 season for Brandon Aiyuk. So I think obviously you look at the tag at least going up at least a little bit, right? With this Justin Jefferson number sprucing up the average. But then you look at the fact that you also have the 5th-year option price, which is locked in as the 49ers at 14 million. And you have to say to Ayuk, listen, dude, like we see this contract, but we also see the fact that we can't just give out a blank check every single time as a reaction to something else that happens around the league. And I think that Dallas, that's going to be their most rational course of action with CeeDee Lamb. With Cincinnati, even more so with Jamar Chase because he's a year earlier in the process. He's still just entering year 4 with the 5th-year option at Cincinnati's disposal. So I think that you return to this scale, pretend that Justin Jefferson's not there. Obviously, he's going to nudge it up a little bit just with the franchise tag impact. But you return to this scale and you say, okay, let's talk a number near the top of this scale. Let's talk a number around Tyreek Hill's scale. Now, I'm fascinated to see what Tyreek Hill's camp says about this, see if they want something higher. But at some point, players and agents are bound by either the deal that they've signed or the deal that's been given to them. In terms of Brandon Aiyuk, that's the 5th-year option and the rookie contract, which they didn't have much control over. At some point, if teams choose, and the Vikings obviously didn't choose this, the Vikings chose to just go crazy with this Justin Jefferson deal. But at some point, there is an anchor on these contract amounts. And I'm fascinated to see what the next move is from the 49ers, the Cowboys, and the Bengals. All right, post your questions. Waiting for the good ones. I mean, tagging Brandon Aiyuk, that's something that would still be obviously a year away. They have the 5th-year option price tag at 14.1 million this year. After that, the contract is set to expire. Then the tag would come. Would the 49ers use it? They've shown in the past that they're willing to use it. They don't like to. They used it with Robbie Gould as a negotiating tool. They ultimately reached a long-term deal before Gould played on the tag, but they used the tag to keep him in the building and create an environment for negotiation on their terms or closer to their terms. So that's a decision that we won't see the 49ers have to make for another year. That being said, the franchise tag again is the average of the top 5 salaries at any given position. So when you do have Justin Jefferson signed for 35 million per year, that bumps up the number. It will bump up the number of the franchise tag. So in that way, of course, it helps the rest of the receiving position because the tag number is now higher and the tag is used as an anchor in negotiations by these teams. But that's a longer term thing. That's something that you would look at over the course of a year, over the course of more time, especially as the tag grows with the top 5 contracts growing in value. What I want to know is what the shorter term impact of this deal is going to be. Are receivers realistically going to be able to see massive short-term increases in salary? And that's Brandon Aiyuk, CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase are the most obvious suspects here early on. Are they going to be, are there requests for crazy money if they do make those closer to Justin Jefferson's going to be honored, or are teams going to say, no, wait, pump the brakes? We're going to sit here and we're going to exact our own leverage, and our own leverage is more tethered in a scale like this. No player likes being tagged, but again, we're we're not at a tag spot yet. That's not until next year. The tag is the bane of players' existence in the NFL. It is the ultimate tool for NFL teams to keep these salaries under control. Obviously, Minnesota ignored that tool today when they gave Justin Jefferson this type of money, but no player likes being tagged. Players would rather negotiate a deal that's much closer to their terms than some kind of preset amount that obviously constrains things to just 1 year. So, but it is, I don't want to say it's a nuclear option at teams' disposal, but it is an option at teams' disposal. And it is something that even if they don't use it, it does rein some of these contracts in. In theory, everything is in theory right now because we are dealing with a historically massive Justin Jefferson contract. Adam Schefter reported it a little bit earlier today. If you like APY, I mean, that's a simpler measure of a deal. It tops APY for non-quarterbacks. It was very obvious that Justin Jefferson took aim at Nick Bosa with this deal, who was previously the highest paid non-quarterback in the league. It's 35 million APY versus 34 million for Nick Bosa. Fully guaranteed money for Jefferson, 88.7 million, just edging out Bosa's deal signed last September for 88 million. Wow, with a capital W. Again, if you want to see the percentage increase, you could see it right here. 88.7 million for Jefferson in fully guaranteed money. Number 2, and it had been number 1 for a while, Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill at 52.5. That is a 69% jump from 1 to 2 that we just witnessed with this Justin Jefferson contract today. So there's one question that you should be asking right now. Does this pop the wide receiver bubble? We've been seeing big deals. We obviously hadn't been seeing deals higher than Tyreek Hill, which was signed a couple years ago in terms of fully guaranteed money until right now. But we had seen the top 10 become more robust. We had seen, especially spots 6 to 10 in fully guaranteed money, were starting to get filled recently. As you can see here, this is actually probably spots 10 to 15. So some of the B list money was, or the A minus list money was really filling in. So the list was becoming more solid. But the top of this list had been filling out over the course of March and April in the first wave of free agency. But we hadn't seen the high water mark increase since Tyreek Hill's 52.5 million. All of a sudden, the high water mark has indeed increased, and it's increased a staggering amount, 36.2 million. I mean, it's increased the amount of Jalen Waddle's fully guaranteed money. 35.9 million was his total amount of fully guaranteed money. That's the gap now between Justin Jefferson and Tyreek Hill. That is a 69% increase. Back in the Bosa days, that was last year, he raised the high watermark of fully guaranteed money amongst non-quarterbacks from 80 million to 88 million. That was a 10% increase. So we are just sitting here wondering if the wide receiver bubble is now ready to pop. And if it's ready to pop, well, that's bad news for Brandon Aiyuk and CeeDee Lamb, because teams will just sit there and say, wait, no, you're under contract. We cannot afford to pay you this kind of money. There's Justin Jefferson smiling. This picture was obviously taken before he signed this preposterously huge contract, but I'm sure he's smiling right now. Again, I'm sure we'll get a picture or video of Justin Jefferson talking about it at some point in the very near future. All right, I'm ready for some more questions. I know it's early. I know many of you probably still waking up, just getting to work, but this is big news. This is very intriguing news. We don't know exactly what the impact will be yet because it's such a big contract. I mean, sometimes you see incremental rises, but sometimes you see these absolute smashes of the previous high watermark. And in that case, it disorients everybody, and nobody's really sure how the dust is going to settle. Nobody's really sure how this is going to impact the next order of business moving forward. Invader 49er says, Lynch, this is what I've been saying. Lynch doesn't have to do a damn thing. Ayuk is under contract. Yes. I mean, teams can put their foot down. And that's where things can become contentious, obviously, especially when one receiver has to look over at another franchise and he sees that Minnesota has paid Justin Jefferson this amount of money. But business is business, contracts are contracts. And that's why teams ultimately have the ball in their court, which makes this all the more shocking. It's like Minnesota was bidding against themselves. I mean, when you look at the list right here, I mean, I guess Justin Jefferson could have said no to 55 million fully guaranteed and just waited, but at some point he's hurting himself, right? Especially a guy who did get hurt last year. You do want to sign something that gets that money into your bank account now. The fact that Minnesota went up to 88.7 million, I mean, just took the top off of this contract when the previous high water mark was what it was with Tyreek Hill. That's crazy. And now the rest of the league is going to have to react, and we'll see what the fallout's going to be. And a reaction from the rest of the league can be no reaction at all, as we see here in this comment. It could just be, okay, wait, we're sitting back. You play on your contract because we are not touching that Justin Jefferson deal. We're not letting that crazy outlier amount influence us into something that we weren't planning on doing. Doug Hall says, I see people say let Ayuk walk. To me, the real question is what would the 49ers pay to get him if he was available for another team? That's a good question. That's a good starting point that you could have in your head. But then you realize that since he's on your team, you have an inherent advantage as the 49ers because he's already under contract for 14 million. So you don't have to pay him open market rate, theoretically. I know the Vikings are blowing up all theories by the fact that they paid Justin Jefferson this much. But you also have franchise tag capabilities if you're the 49ers beyond this 2024 season. So you could have a number in your head of what Brandon Aiyuk would be worth to you if you were on the open market, but then you could sit back as the 49ers and smile and say, okay, well, that's great because we don't have to pay him as much as what he would be worth to us in the open market because we drafted him and he's contractually already on our team. So the CBA assists teams in keeping players that they drafted, especially in the first round with the fifth-year option. And that's what the 49ers are right now with Brandon Aiyuk. Now, if somebody else wants to step in and pay Brandon Aiyuk Justin Jefferson money or something that's closer to that echelon, they could trade with the 49ers. They could send the 49ers something really tantalizing, a package in return for Brandon Aiyuk, and the 49ers can say, okay, fine, we want this compensation, and we definitely don't want to pay what Brandon Aiyuk wants, and they can move on. The Chiefs did that with Tyreek Hill, right, when he went to the Miami Dolphins. I don't know where this is at as far as that goes. I think everybody around the league right now is just feeling the shockwaves of how large this Justin Jefferson contract was, and they're waiting to see if this is going to move anything in the short term for Brandon Ayuk, CeeDee Lamb, and Jamar Chase. So right now, I think the wisest course of action is to remember that teams do theoretically, I have to say theoretically now because of what Minnesota just did, but teams do still have, and I joke about that, teams do still have contractual control over this situation, and we'll see how they exert it moving forward. We'll see how this Jefferson contract impacts things. Do the 49ers need a $50 million wide receiver when they have so many other weapons? 50 million fully guaranteed, I think you're talking. Oh, I think that you're trying to make the team as good as possible if you're the 49ers within the constraints of the salary cap. It's not whether you need somebody or don't need somebody. It's trying to make the most efficient football team with the space that you have at your disposal, period. So with Brandon Aiyuk, you've got this. You have an extremely productive and efficient receiver who's done some really, really productive stuff for the football team over the course of his time there. He's got really good rapport with Brock Purdy. He was one of the top graded receivers in football last year. I've showed you the chart where he's in the upper right, where he's the outlier in that regard. And he was part of the number one offense in football, and he was a key part of that number one offense in football. So you have this, and then you have whatever the potential price is going to be to extend him. But you also, again, you don't have to be playing in this hypothetical of a $50 million wide receiver. Not necessarily. Not when you have him under contract already for $14 million this year on the fifth-year option. So what Aiyuk is doing is super impressive. From a cultural standpoint, you do want to reward him. That's what the 49ers have done with all of these A-list players. But you also need to make sure that you do it within reason so that you don't destroy the rest of the roster. There is a salary cap in this league. So, the question is an interesting one that you pose, but it's not that simple. It's much more complicated than that, especially since the 49ers are locked into a lower price tag already, a much lower price tag for Brandon Aiyuk this year. All right, so that's about all that I have to say. We'll let everybody else get to it. I'm going to go get some breakfast and we'll talk more about this. The Justin Jefferson contract might have broken the scale for wide receivers, but it also might have popped the bubble. And, I think when I see this kind of increase, that's the first thing I think of is a bubble popping. $88.7 million fully guaranteed over Tyreek Hill's $52.5 million. Top in APY as well. And, Jefferson took aim at Nick Bosa, who's no longer the king amongst non-quarterbacks in money. Look at that. $35 million versus Bosa's 34, 88.7 versus Bosa's 88. We wonder about 49ers minicamp tomorrow. Will Aiyuk and Christian McCaffrey show up? It's a mandatory thing. So they face fines if they don't. We don't know what the McCaffrey deal at all is, by the way. He just hasn't been at OTAs. Maybe we get a few more answers tomorrow. But the Aiyuk 49ers impact, the CeeDee Lamb Cowboys impact of this Justin Jefferson deal, we'll buckle up and find out because we haven't seen anything like this in NFL history. A 69% increase in fully guaranteed money over the previous high water mark at the position. Jefferson has taken aim at Nick Bosa. He's surpassed him contractually, and now we find out how the market reacts because it's anybody's guess for Brandon Aiyuk and company. Everybody, thanks for joining. We will talk to you very soon.